Helen, why don't you get us started?
Okay, well, why don't you talk a little bit about what happened with the Chinatown development? Hasn't that happened before?
Yes, this is the second time this particular project has been tabled to a public hearing a few months from now, in fact 2 months from now. I understand that it has actually acted as a bit of a catalyst for some of the disparate community groups in China to try and come in China, for some of the disparate community groups in Chinatown to come together and try and create more of a unified voice, which I think is a very helpful development for that neighborhood, particularly as we start to move to revise the area redevelopment plan for that neighborhood. So I'm a little nervous that 2 months might not be enough time, but I'm hoping that, particularly over Chinese New Year, but I'm hopeful that the applicant and the community groups will be able to really get some substantial work done in those 2 months and better understand one another's points of view. One of the challenges that on this file, dating back to the first time it came last November, is that it really seemed that a lot of folks in the community had no idea what was being proposed for that site, and I'm hoping we can do a better job on that.
That's already been through the Planning Commission, so how has it gotten this far without a level of engagement that the community would be happy with? I don't know.
There we go. I was just letting him get in.
Okay.
Well, this does happen sometimes when you have an applicant that feels they've done enough community engagement, but many people in the community don't feel they've been well engaged. This does happen. In this particular case, when you've got a disparate community with a lot of different organizations speaking for different elements of the community, where you have a lot of elderly folks and sometimes language barriers, I can understand why this would be more challenging. I am disappointed that we didn't have much more engagement between the last tabling and this one, but I'm willing to try and give this one some more time.
Let's talk about the Kensington Legion. It appears that height is a concern with those that are opposed. How valid a concern is that when in these neighborhoods you have the redevelopment of these 2.5, 3-story infills already, people are peeking in other yards?
Well, we always think about things like shadowing and overflow in issues like this. In this particular case, you've got two competing elements. One is that this is a development along a major road, along Kensington Road, where you have lots of multifamily to the west and some to the east, and you have some real redevelopment along the corridor. So that's on the one hand, people say, well, that makes sense. On the other hand, a 31-meter height is certainly a higher building than that neighborhood is used to, and higher than really anything else in that neighborhood from a technical perspective. There's a weird mechanical roof thing that changes that answer a little bit. But so a lot of folks are very concerned about that. The applicant is showing that they think the shadowing will be less than a 6-story block building because of the way the building is constructed. But these are all discussions that we'll continue to have during the public hearing. But it seems the primary concerns of the residents are the height and the access and egress to the parking.
And you've mentioned a couple of times there seems to be a different discourse from the community association from now versus months ago.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing, not just from the West Hillhurst Community Association, but also from the Hillhurst Sunnyside Community Association. When you look at the letters that were submitted in the summer and the letters that were submitted for this process, the tone is significantly harder, and that just makes my spidey senses tingle a little bit as to, again, the nature of the engagement and what may or may not have gone wrong in the engagement process. Go ahead.
I was going to say a bit late to the party, but you mentioned last week when you were going to Big City Mayors that you were going to have a chance to sit down with Mayor Coderre. I'd never heard what happened in your discussion. So
I didn't really sit down with him because, the argument that I have been making on this is that provinces and mayors, including me, don't really have the right to impose conditions on these sorts of projects. We live in a federal federation, and this really is the role of the federal government. So while I can advocate, I really don't have the right to impose conditions, and I didn't think it made sense to sort of have a negotiation with mayor to mayor when we don't really have any power to do anything about that. That said, I did spend some time this weekend in Quebec City celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Quebec-Calgary Sister City Partnership and hanging out with my friend Bonhomme. He calls me Bonhomme Calgary, which I like. Anyway, I did get a chance to speak with the mayor of Quebec about his advocacy for the Energy East pipeline. And he did mention that while he believes that pipelines are a much better way to transport hydrocarbons than by rail or by road, he also suggested that he had some concerns with TransCanada's engagement, and he felt that TransCanada could be much more authentic and much more transparent with the citizens along the route. Let's remember, Quebec City is the point where the proposed Energy East pipeline actually crosses the river, crosses the St. Lawrence. So, I promised him that I would take that message back to the folks at TransCanada here in Calgary and ensure that they understand the concerns of the people who may be impacting. Yeah.
Now, Uber has come out saying that they're going to launch a campaign awareness, saying that the current draft rules that are coming to council later this month would prevent ride sharing from returning to local residents.
They've made that threat a number of times in a number of jurisdictions. As far as I know, they've never actually followed through on that threat anywhere.
They say that you're asking for more than what Edmonton just approved when it comes to vehicle inspections and some other things like that.
Well, Calgary's rules have 4 basic criteria. The vehicle has to be inspected. The driver has to pass a police and background check. The driver has to have a driver's license. The car has to have insurance. To me, those sound like very, very reasonable requests. I don't think any Calgarian would disagree with those requests. I understand that Uber, they haven't been very clear on what their problem is, but I understand their concern is with the technicalities. For example, we'd like the Calgary Police Service to do the background check because they have a very sophisticated way of doing background checks. And we know that people who were accepted for Uber driving here in the past in Calgary were people who had criminal records. So we'd like the police service to do the background check. They'd prefer to have some third-party online company do the background check. These are things that we'll sort out.
Does Edmonton's regulations, do they undercut Calgary's rules?
Oh, I don't think so. I think that Uber has a well-known tactic of trying to pit jurisdictions against one another, but I think that the requirements that we're looking at are very similar to those in Edmonton. Now, Uber could have avoided all of this if instead of going the way they've gone, trying to death by 1,000 cuts in every jurisdiction, and simply entered Canada saying we're not going to launch until regulations are in place. Here's a template of regulations that have worked for us in other places. Here's a menu that could work, pick and choose from it. But instead Uber insists on wasting lots of public time and money on creating it from scratch in every single jurisdiction, and it's not the way I would operate.
Do you think this is an